Hi, I'm Teresa Tomeo, host of the daily EWTN radio program, Catholic Connection. I'm also a Catholic author and speaker, and welcome to 10 Minutes with Teresa Tomeo, or 10 Minutes with T. In these segments, we take a brief look at timely issues affecting our Catholic faith and our world. I'm so glad you tuned in, and I hope you can stay tuned for the entire 10 minutes, and I'm sure that you believe that God deserves an extra 10 minutes of your day. So we've got a great segment lined up for you today. My area of expertise, if you're not familiar with my work, is media influence and activism. I spent most of my life, my professional career, in the secular media, primarily in the Detroit area, working as a news reporter and anchor in radio and television. I left the secular media about 11 years ago in 2000 to start my own communications company and take the experience that I gained in the secular media to help people counter what was happening in the culture. Not to throw out the TV and the radio and give up on the media, because that's not what the Catholic Church teaches us. The Catholic Church says that we should be out there and involved in it. But the Catholic Church also says the media have to be used wisely and properly, and that when they're not used in those manners, they can have a very detrimental impact on us and our faith and our world. So that's what I do. I speak around the country, and as I said, I host a daily show, and I also write books on the media. And so that's what we're going to talk about in this segment, taking a brief look and overview of how the media impact our world. Let me ask you a few questions, and I brought this up in the very first segment of 10 Minutes with T, or 10 Minutes with Teresa Tomeo. Stop and think about how the media may be impacting your relationship with God. Next question I have for you today is, how are the media influences in your life? We're talking about texting, the internet, time in front of the TV, unless you're watching something wholesome like you are now. How are the media in your life affecting your relationship with your family? And finally, are you willing to make a difference in the culture and in your home? Are you willing to maybe cut back on your media time to spend more time in prayer and with your family? Are you willing maybe to write an editorial or to call up a news director or a station manager if you have an issue with the media? You know, as Catholics, we're all called to evangelize by virtue of our baptism, not just folks who have a pulpit or who are in front of the camera or a microphone or who may have a blog. All of us, in some way, shape, or form, are called to evangelize. And one of the ways we can do that is by being a witness and by speaking up about the things that are impacting our life, especially the culture. My first book was entitled Noise: How Our Media-Saturated Culture Dominates Our Lives and Dismantles Families. And it was primarily a book that broke down all the different areas of the media, including media bias, advertising, music, the internet, and how that impacts families and our lives in general, as I mentioned earlier. I have a new book coming out this year from Ignatius Press called Extreme Makeover. And I would suggest to you that we need an extreme media makeover. So that's what we're going to look at in this upcoming segment. We're going to take a brief look at media influence, and I think you just might be surprised about how much research is out there and how it impacts us in our daily lives and in our relationships and in our just entire thinking process. I tell people when I give my talks around the country on media influence that we have to go through some sort of a media rehab or a media detox, or as in this case, an extreme media makeover. And again, that doesn't mean that we can't watch television or listen to music, but we really have to understand and start discerning what's coming at us 24/7. A couple of statistics for you off the top. Did you know that young people, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation, now consume about 53 hours of media a week? Think about that. That's more than a full-time job. And adults, we're not much better. We consume about 40-plus hours, 40 to 42 hours a week of the media. And I would venture to say, with the research I've done and with the research that's out there from groups like the American Medical Association, Stanford University, Columbia, the American Psychological Association, that majority of what we're watching or taking in is not exactly wholesome and certainly not coming from a Catholic or a Christian perspective. One of the speakers that I admire is Matthew Kelly. He's from Australia. He's written several books, and he is international, on the international scene. He does a lot of work in the business world, but he also speaks on Catholic faith issues and speaks at men's conferences and Catholic conferences around the country and around the globe, as I mentioned. He said something very profound when he was speaking at a men's conference in my home state of Michigan, which I covered for my radio network. He said, "The way people view the world is the way they live their lives." Think about that for a second. The way people view the world is the way they live their lives. And how are people viewing their world? Primarily from the culture, from the newspapers they read, from the TV shows they watch, from the radio shows they listen to, from the websites they visit online. That's how we are viewing our world, through the media, through the culture. And that can be very, very destructive. It can be very enlightening depending on how you're discerning those messages coming to you, but primarily in terms of the sexual content, the violent content, the messages that are specifically anti-Christian and even more anti-Catholic, especially in the areas of the life issues and whatnot and sexuality, can really be very destructive to us and can have an impact on us. I know personally it did for me many years before I came back to my faith. One of my favorite Catholic rock stars, as I like to say, is the Archbishop of the Archdiocese of Denver, and that's Charles Chaput. And he says, the people who shape our universities, think tanks, mass media, and political party leadership no longer believe in the natural law. So think about that. If they don't even understand the basics of the person, the dignity of a human person, how are they going to be giving us messages? What are they going to be telling us about the human person? What are they going to be telling us about the life issues? It's going to be a much different perspective than what we have in the Catholic Church. All right, let's take a look at some statistics in terms of how the media impact us. You know, I always say it's a perfect storm in terms of what's happened in our world, the perfect cultural storm. We had poor catechesis after Vatican II. We had this media explosion. At the same time, in the 60s and 70s, we have what they call the sexual revolution and the influence of radical feminism versus what John Paul II gives us, which is called new feminism or true feminism. Let's take a look first at sexual content. One study by the RAND Corporation, which does a lot of research in terms of media influence, shows that sex on television, and this is kind of funny when you think about it, it's kind of like it's not exactly brain surgery or rocket science, but sex on TV is actually linked to higher pregnancy rates among teens. And if your kids are watching television a great deal, and that statistic I gave you earlier, 53 hours a week, 70% of all TV programming, 70% contains sexual content. And 75% of the videos on music television also contain sexual imagery. And in terms of violence on television, one report by the University of Albany shows that 3-year-old children who are exposed to more television are at increased risk for exhibiting violent behavior. If you have children, by the time they're 13 years old, they will have witnessed 100,000 violent acts on TV. And get this, that number doubles to 200,000 by the time they're 18 years old. More than half of the videos on music television contain violence, and over 1,000 studies in the U.S. show at least a casual connection between violence in the media and aggressive behavior in children. At least 10% of youth violence is attributed to watching violence on television, and a study released in February of 2009 shows that violent media numb viewers to the pain of others. These are just a few of the statistics that are out there in terms of the connection between what the media are giving us and how we are living our daily lives. Remember what I mentioned earlier from the speaker, Catholic speaker Matthew Kelly? The way people view the world is the way they live their lives. Now, I'm not saying that the media are all to blame for everything. We can't simply point to the media and say it's the media's fault. But certainly with all the research that's out there, it would be extremely ignorant of us to think that the media don't have any type of influence. So what can you do to make a difference? Well, first of all, here's what I tell people. In terms of our extreme media makeover, actually sit down with your family and take stock of how much time you spend with the media. If you have children, the American Academy of Pediatrics says no TV for children under 2 at all. Zip, zero, nada. And for children in grade school and high school, they say 2 hours of TV a day. And remember that statistic? That most young people are consuming 53 hours of media a week? I would say that we have a lot of work to do. So you take stock of how much media. Secondly, the most important thing from the American Academy of Pediatrics, especially if you have children, is to keep the computers and the TVs out of the bedroom and put them in a central area of the home where they can monitor activity. And finally, keep your family meals. These are just a few ideas, and in upcoming segments we'll get into more detail about this, but these are 3 major things that can make a difference. Finally, keep your meals media-free. That means no iPods, no cell phones. Let your telephone get the voicemails. Don't answer the phone during dinner, and spend time, quality time, with your family. That's a brief look at our extreme media makeover. Thanks for tuning in to 10 Minutes with Teresa Tomeo, or 10 Minutes with T, where we take a brief look at timely issues affecting our world and our Catholic faith. I hope you stay tuned for our next edition of 10 Minutes with Teresa Tomeo, or 10 Minutes with T. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us on this edition of 10 Minutes with T. To find out more about the show, go to faithandlifetv.com. To book Teresa for a speaking event or to find out more about Teresa's ministry, visit teresatomeo.com. We'll see you next time right here on 10 Minutes with T. God bless.